Well, hello to all of you joining us. As you know, this week I will be hosting conversations around Mother's Day. And yesterday we got to talk to some moms of littles, and today we get to talk to some moms of teens. And oh boy, we all need to talk to the moms of teens, right? I have to be honest, being a mom of a teen is actually one of my favorite things. I love
Mhm.
this stage of life because most, I know that it can be difficult, but for the most part, raising teenagers is really fun. They're really, really fun, and it's never a dull moment, right, ladies? So I have two incredible moms of teens with me today, and we're just going to be discussing what it's like to raise some teenagers. And so, ladies, I would love it if you would just introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your teenage kids. Stephanie, will you start?
Would love to. I'm Stephanie Wills, and I have a 19-year-old Elise and a 15-year-old Blaze.
Yes, senior and freshman, right?
Freshman.
Yes,
Yep.
so fun, so fun. Kelly?
Yeah. So I'm Kelly Nichols, and we have 5 kids. Our youngest is 4, and then our oldest 3 are in those teenage years. So we have an 18-year-old, and then 13 and 12. But we all know a 12-year-old girl in 6th grade is definitely a teenager.
Yes. No doubt. I've definitely experienced that. And, I've got teenagers across the board. I've got a 19, 18, and 15-year-old. So I am also in the throes
Mhm,
of teenager life. Even though some of
mhm.
them are adults, I still pay for their phone. So they're still teenagers. I'll just still call them teenagers. But
Mhm.
thank you guys so much for sharing with us today. And we're just going to jump in. We're just going to jump in because I know that there's tons of mamas of teens and they're just waiting to get some answers from you guys, our local our local experts of teens. So listen, tell me, what is the hardest part about being a mom of a teenager, and what's the best thing? Stephanie, will you share with us a little bit?
Sure. So I think the hardest thing is helping them become independent and you know um, letting go a little bit of the strings attached, because they are going through a season of like developing their personal beliefs and relationships and all those beautiful things and preparing to be an adult. And I think that's been the hardest thing to navigate and not hold so tightly and trust a little bit more in the work that's been done and what God is doing in their lives. So I think that's the hardest part for me right now. The best thing is getting to help them navigate some of those bigger things because we have real conversations, and the laughter, they get all the jokes, and we've all learned to just laugh at ourselves. So we have a lot of fun, you
Yeah,
know.
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
a fun stage for
it
sure.
really
It
is.
is. Kelly,
Yeah.
what's the hardest part about being a mom of teen, and what's the best thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stephanie said it. It's just that equipping them and then trusting that you've equipped them well, and then you like back up, right? And you're like, make good choices, and then you're like, oh, but make it, like that, just like push and pull of just like when to let go and step back, and when to like kind of stand real close, like you do when your baby's learning to walk, right? You're like, oh, okay, we'll let go. So I think that's it. But I love the teenage phase. I love it. I've loved it so much. I have so much fun with my kids, and I'm just so in awe and amazed of like these young adults that they are becoming, and so excited for the young men and women that like I see them being.
Yeah, that's really fun to actually see glimpses of like what they're going to be
Hmm.
like as adults, and that's
Right.
really fun to see them mature in that way. It's such a fun stage. I love it. I love it.
Hmm.
So okay, so you ladies know, because your kids are both active and they do stuff, right? Your teenagers are busy, but it's such an important thing for us as adults to not just go through the motions and have real interactions with our kids. And so, and this is one of the
Right.
reasons why I asked the both of you, because I have seen you ladies do this really well. And I have admired how you've done that. So, how do you actually carve out some intentional time with your kids?
Yeah, I mean, it just has to be on their schedule, right? So, I mean, I don't know of people like I don't know how everybody does it, but I know for us, it's always like midnight or 11 p.m. Like I'm kind of brushing my teeth, like, oh, let's head to bed. And then he's standing in the hallway and like drops a pretty big question or a comment that I'm like, well, we're gonna unpack this for a while, but it's always late. And he comes and finds us, like no matter how much, like Randall and I want to just go to bed sometimes, like he'll come and find us sitting on the couch and just sit down with like his, fifth meal of the day and just want to be with us. And we're gonna sit there as long as he's there because that's our time together.
Yeah.
That's so true, Kelly. That is so true. And me at the end of the day is like, I'm just
Mhm.
want to snuggle down and go to bed.
Right.
And then I have a figure in the door, just like you said, just kind of
Mhm.
like, are you still awake? And so that, I mean, late night thinkers, that's what they are. I'm an early morning
Mhm.
thinker. So I've had to really kind of let that go and be like, God, give me the rest, and we're in it. Like I
Right.
in the middle of the night wake ups, like to crying or yeah. So so that,
Mhm.
and the other thing is, I know that taxing is the most annoying thing to have to run your kids. I've had to run mine. They're both close to getting their license, and that day I will grieve because we have the best conversations in the car on the way, and they've almost kind of
Mhm.
prepared what they're gonna like. They have it in mind what they want to talk about in that taxiing around. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna miss those days, even though it is super inconvenient, you know? Yeah.
No, Stephanie, I can totally identify. Taylor and I actually, I took her to school, I want to say her seventh or eighth grade year. And it's just what, a 7-minute drive from my house in the mornings. But golly day, the most precious time. And actually, one of the things that we did is we practiced rap songs because it was just really fun to do. And so I learned, like, how there's like pop songs and then in the middle there might be like a rap song. We
Mhm.
worked on that. And she was so much better at it than I was. It took me a lot of time, but I think we got down like 3 raps by the end of it. So I mean, just, those little things,
That's
golly,
great.
you can't replace those memories, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's so precious. So you're right, the car is so precious. And
Mhm.
as much as it is a lot of work, you do miss it when it's gone. So, yeah, you're
Mhm.
right. So good. So good. Okay. Well, I think that most moms right now would want the answer to this question. And I know that everybody has their thoughts on this, so it can be one way or the other. But I would love it if you would share, some tips on this. So social media is such a big thing for teenagers. You've got Instagram, Facebook, which they aren't on as much, right? But I have seen some teenagers on there, but you've got Snapchat and TikTok. I mean, you've got it all, right? And it's this
Mhm.
whole world. And so, what are some guidelines or boundaries that you guys have put in place to help them in this area? Because honestly, they don't necessarily if we don't put boundaries in place, they're just going to keep going, right? They're going to explore in a world that they don't
Right.
necessarily need to, or they're not ready to. And so what are some things that you ladies have done to kind of help guide your kids in regards to social media?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, so I'm the oldest. I'm married to an oldest child. But it's so true. Like with your oldest, you're like, oh, I'm not gonna do that one again. Um, right. So we got him a smartphone in middle school because that was the way all of his friends communicated. And he was lonely and he wanted a way to communicate with everybody. And he was missing out on things because people would be like, oh, I forgot to like text your mom. Or so we broke down, we got him a smartphone. And then because of that, like at least in their era, I don't know if kids still do this, but like a lot of the communication was through Instagram. So not long after that, we let him get social media, and we thought it was all of the guardrails, all of the boundaries. And then we had some fallout from it, some big issues that came up that we dealt with because we have a solid relationship. But that taught us that middle schoolers are not I mean, in our opinion, middle schoolers are not ready for social media and they're not ready for a smartphone. And so now that we have new teenagers, right, like in that new teenage era, this year has been a big phone year. They wanted phones, and so we finally did for Christmas. We got them phones, but it's not a smartphone. So they have a way to text people and they have a way to call people, and I think it takes a picture, and that's it. There's no social media, and we'll just evaluate, when we feel like we're all ready to kind of transition to that next step. My oldest son did have social media for a little while. Once, like, he got that back in high school, and we were just really open. Phones like charge in the kitchen in the charging drawer at night. You don't have a code, or if you have a code because siblings, then we know the code. There's a lot of guardrails that we put up, and he had our oldest had the social media for a while, but him and his girlfriend broke up, and when they broke up, he kind of was like, I don't really need social media anymore. So he actually doesn't. He's spent his senior year without it. So that's worked for us. It's hard though, because I do feel like we are absolutely in the minority as parents on that no smartphone, no social media thing, because even like church groups, like their student group will communicate via social media, or they'll have a group text thread that doesn't work on like a little, flip phone. Schools even, schools will be like, we'll update things on our Facebook page, we'll update things on our student group page. So I try to follow all of that stuff, but it's a challenge. And we know that, other people are saying like especially for middle school, no social media in middle school. But I do think like our community has to kind of get on board with that too, and be like, okay, well, if that's the case, then we'll, gear things to the parent side, but we won't use this as a tool of communication if we're saying that it may not be best for kids.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. I tell you, because, so I've heard this illustration before, and basically we tell our kids this, okay? And we did a lot of the same things that you guys have done, Kelly, but one of the principles that we followed just in general, not just with social media, but in general with their lives, is we've got a rope to our kids. And when we trust them, and when they give us reason to trust them, we extend the rope. But when they give us reason to not, we pull that rope back.
Pull it back.
Sometimes we got to yank it back, right? Because they do make mistakes, and
right.
They will explore on social media,
right.
and they will happen to see inappropriate things, or because that's out there, right? I mean, that's be real. And so sometimes we got to yank the rope back. And there have been times in our kids' life where we can see this little pattern and we yank it back. And I tell you, we've actually had tons of presentations from our kids for a plea of social media, like a PowerPoint presentation that they're ready for it or whatever. And, or like, the only thing that I want for Christmas is Instagram, mom, and I it's tempting because it's free.
Right.
But, having some guardrails and boundaries is so important. Stephanie, have you guys done anything in regards to that?
So, yeah, it is a tough one. I'll have to say, we aren't as strict, to be honest. But I have such an open communication with my kids. We agreed with the middle school. They don't need phones in middle school. They really, really don't. And so about the end of 8th grade is when they start to really get the itch to start, communicating. And so, I mean, we had a borrow phone where if they were going out, they could take the spare phone with them. And it was very simple like that. Didn't have any of the apps on it or anything. So they could just call, because I feel like there's no way to call if you need something. So that was just a concern,
Right.
but they wanted by 8th grade Christmas. I mean, that's what they both
Mhm.
wanted. My daughter is 19 and just now got social media. She had no interest. She knew it was going to hurt her heart.
Mhm.
She knew she was not up to the social bombardment. So she kind of
Right.
set that boundary for herself. But the younger is a social person. Like, he needs his people, and he just,
Mhm.
that's his influence. He loves it. He doesn't need the drama. So I feel like
Mhm.
he's gauged it, and he's just gotten off. I'd be like, so you know, it's like, I'm not on this. I'm not on this. And he's like, I'm done. I don't need it.
Mhm.
So we have a lot of communications though about inappropriateness and what it does to
Yeah.
your spirit.
Yeah.
And it may be alluring at first, but we just have
Mhm.
some of those major conversations. So when it does get hard, then we help them. And sometimes they can't take it away from themselves, but we can, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like there's just been that open communication about all the time about social media. For sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so good. And I think for a lot of moms, it'll be nice to know that they're not the only ones dealing with it,
Mhm.
right? That it's this
Yeah.
tension of perhaps, I mean, saying no to your kids isn't fun, right? But
No. Right.
it's important, right? And in
Mhm.
order to protect them and their mind and their spirit, like you said, Stephanie, it's so important. So, okay,
Mhm.
if you're listening to this right now, I have a question, but if you have little kids in the room, they're not going to want to hear this answer. So if you're listening, close the little ears of the little ones, okay? Because this is real talk with real teenagers, right? And so there is a subject that we have to discuss because moms of teenagers have to discuss this. And so that's why we're talking about this. But like I said, if you have little ones in the room, plug their ears or ask them to go get a toy out of the other room. Okay. So, okay. The subject is sex. All right. Sex is a difficult but necessary conversation. One of the things that I think is cool
Mhm.
is that each of us have boys and girls in this conversation, and the
Right.
conversation is different, right? One of the things that I love is Andy Stanley. He says this, that sex isn't an awkward 20-minute conversation. We want it to be as parents. We would like for it to be an awkward 20-minute
Right.
conversation and get it over with, right? But sex is actually an awkward 20-year conversation or however long that lasts, right?
Mhm.
Because this has to be an ongoing conversation with our kids, and
Right.
we have to have, just like Stephanie shared just a little bit, having that open communication is so important
Mhm.
when you've got teenagers. So just a question, how have you guys discussed this topic of sex with your kids? And how do you decide how much is too much and when to discuss the topic? And then what are some tips that you might have with discussing it? Like, how have you gone about doing that? So, all right, somebody jump in. Who's got a good answer for
Yeah.
this? Lovely topic.
No, it's good. But I mean, Randall and I both grew up in I think it was partly generational, right? Like if you had a sex conversation, it was don't have sex till you're married, right? And
Yeah.
so like my mom was a nurse, so we knew all of the like biology, but we didn't have that like open conversation. And so I think that was just generational. Like none of my friends had that either. It was just like a don't have sex, and that was kind of it. So when Randall and I got married and we had kids, we were like, this is going to be a conversation that we have. Like we want it to be an open conversation. But if we want it to be an open conversation at like 13, 14, 15, 16, when they get a girlfriend, then we need it to start early. So we started talking about like just everything very matter of fact from a very young age. But like you said, Tabitha, like it's that kind of dance of how much information is too much information. Like I don't want my 4-year-old at like story time at the library to be like, so this is what happened, right? Like because my kids would be those. So I mean it was just like, let's start talking early and then let's do it. For what we've seen, at least for our oldest 3, is that they know the mechanics and they know everything, and then somewhere around 9 or 10 they ask that very practical, like, how does the sperm get inside the egg? And we're like, okay, here we go. Like,
Let's do this.
here, let's start. And so some of it I'll say is like child led from that. Like they kind of will gauge, like we'll give them some information and they're like, cool, can I go outside now? So like some of it is just seeing where they're at. And then, yeah, some of it is just like what they're ready for and when their little brains and their minds. And some of the kids, it was like a part of a conversation. And then some of them, it was just literally like, I'm cooking spaghetti. And it's like, hey, so how does this happen? I'm like, whoa, okay, all right. So just having that conversation. And then from there, it's continued. Like, this is, it's puberty and this is where your body's going to feel in puberty. And these are normal feelings. And then all of the things that go along with that it led us to a place that felt very comfortable and very open. So when our oldest son started dating, these are conversations that we had, and it kind of touches, with like our parenting style and the, house rules, which are basically just honor. So, incorporating that in, like not having sex and treating your girlfriend with respect is a way that you honor her and you honor yourself and you honor God. Right. And so it's those conversations, but it's very open and it's very much like, this is what I expect that you're feeling, or this is what I would think you're feeling. And maybe you are. And they're like, yeah, this is it. So it's a lot of just open conversations. And I think, Stephanie, you said that car time is so precious for those conversations. And I will say what I've seen is when you're not face to face, those conversations, those awkward conversations can happen a little more open and free than they do when you're sitting like face to face on the couch, right? So when we're driving and I'm like, so, I mean, let's just talk about like, where's your line in the sand? Like when you're dating, you have a girlfriend, like you need to know exactly where your boundaries are. So where are they? Like you throw that question out and you're both facing forward. So it's a little easier, I think, to be open maybe, but that's been, how it's been for us.
That's so good. Yeah, I would agree with the car conversation because as a matter of fact, I can remember having this conversation with Braden when he got his license. I said, well, how are we going to talk about sex now? He was like, okay, thanks, Mom.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll go on long night drives together.
Yeah, that's right. Stephanie, you got any quick tips for us? Anything you guys have done?
Yeah, so I agree with the starting young. We started, how our bodies are made different, very simple concepts when they were little. And what I want to encourage parents at is we think of sex in a very mature sense and understand the perversion of it and the dangers of it. And so we have this full spectrum of, realization. When they're little, they're developing that. So they don't have the perverted sense. So you can actually walk into those conversations and set your awkwardness aside and know that this is pure for them and beautiful and part of our design. And it's a very important part of our design. And so I would say that if you haven't, to start, because about 5th or 6th grade, if they're in public schools, they're being exposed to talk about sex. From their peers. And I was shocked. So I had an openness with my kids. So my son would come home and we'd have the conversation of, what's this? Why do they say that? Do they really? And I'm like, a lot of them really don't know what they're talking, but they may have older kids where they've been exposed. And so we just started having those conversations really early on. Yeah. And so now that they're, seeking more intimate relationships, we get to have the why not? Why not have sex? And I think the biggest thing is because you become one with that person. And in God's eyes, you are married. And untangling your spirit from another person is horrible to do to yourself and to that other person. And so with the honoring thing, you are actually guarding both of you till you're ready to commit to a marriage. Yeah. And we talk about the struggle of how hard that is and what leads up to that moment, and self-restraint and how your hormones are designed to carry you through and get you psyched. And so not to like talking about the line in the sand and why getting close to that line is dangerous. Yeah. And how hard it's going to be. So those are just all those are conversations that we have, and they will come to you at some point and say, so my oldest, I mean, this was a while ago, so I feel like I can say it. She came to me and said, so technically, what exactly happens technically? Like, like, how does it work? And so,
Mhm.
she was ready to know. So we talked about it, but it's terrifying as
It
a parent,
is.
Yeah.
but not to them if you just kind of play it cool and have that open conversation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I tell you, one of the
Right.
conversations that I have had with my kids is, I present God's design for purity for them,
Mhm.
but I also recognize the pressure that they feel in this world. And so over and over and over again, I have told them, if you cross a boundary, let me tell you that I still love you no matter what.
Mhm.
I don't want that for them, but I do let them know that they can still come to me, that they can still have a safe place in me and in their dad, and that God is a God that doesn't want their guilt or shame, and that He can redeem that. And
Mhm.
so I think helping kids know that part too is really important, because the
Yeah.
things that are coming at them with society about sex, um, I mean, it's hard. It has to
Mhm.
be so hard. And so I just try to help them see, hey, this is God's design. This is God's best for your life, for purity. However, if you mess up, because we all mess up in some way or another,
Mhm.
right? If you mess up, I'm still here and I still love you, and God can redeem it. God still loves you. And so helping them navigate that guilt and shame. Obviously, I don't want that for my kids, but we've got to help them see that they don't have to live in guilt and shame if they've screwed up. So, yeah, so that's kind of one other little tidbit that I think is so important. So, okay, one last question that I have for you ladies. Thank you again so much for being with me today. But this last question, I think, is probably the most practical, because
Mhm.
no matter where we are in our parenting, no matter what we feel like we can and can't do, because we're always going to feel like, oh, I could do this better, oh, I could do this better. This is one thing that we can all do. And so how do you pray for your kids, and what are some specific verses that you pray over them?
Yeah. So we've gone through quite a bit, and I, during a particularly tough season, got a blessings book that took scripture and changed it into a blessing. And it would have as a line for the name. And I remember when one of them was having nightmares, like just would wake up and was really troubled. And I would take my book and I would pray with their name, and I would insert their name and just pray, because I don't always have the prayers and the things to think. And I remember a couple weeks in, he would say, "Can you bring out that book? Read that book with my name in it."
Oh, I love that.
Like it was written for him,
Yeah.
which was really sweet. And so since then, prayer has been paramount, because we don't have all the answers. We're scared of
Mhm.
them. And so I turn scripture into prayer for them. I think that's the best way to
Okay.
just take you know thanking God for them, blessing them. I can't think of like my go-to scripture, unfortunately. I wish I would have written that down for you, but yeah. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything. I think that's a verse. And whatsoever is, true and noble and lovely, like think about these
Mhm.
things. So helping them manage their thoughts and the toxic and anxiety that a lot of our kids
Mhm.
are facing. We go over that scripture a lot and take away from what is not true and just replace it with what is true. So
So good, Stephanie.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, we like one of my daily prayers for them is, and because my kids are so different, and I think probably everyone can relate to that, right? Is there are always things, especially like, for second, third, fourth, fifth kids, whatever. Um, you look at one kid and you're like, well, I'm not this or I'm not that. And so, and especially that middle school, like new teenage times, there's that identity struggle, right? Where they're like trying on these different identities and they're learning who they are. And so one of my daily prayers, like over them, out aloud at night, before they go to bed, is just that they can trust their identity in Jesus, but also that they are confident in their identity in Jesus. And so we talk a lot about how like God doesn't make mistakes. So, this is who you are, and this is who you are in Jesus, and like calling out those qualities, that those biblical characters that we see, the character that we see in Jesus, that we see in our children, and reminding them, this is who you are. And sometimes they just want to hear it from us, and sometimes, like we have one child that I need you to say this. I need you to believe it about yourself because I see it's true, and I don't lie. So I need you to believe that it is true, and they say it, right. And I think that's just going back to reminding them who they are, but then also whose they are.
Yeah.
And so as a family, we have certain verses I think that God gives us in seasons, and we usually just pray those over our whole family and relate that to what's going on. So right now, I think our lesson, especially over this last year, has been surrender, which is a big topic, right? A big concept. And just, as my oldest is going through the college process and all of those things, praying surrender, trusting those steps. And so really quick, I'll share with his permission. He was struggling to choose a college, and he said, I just keep feeling like I want this college. I keep feeling like God's whispering this other college, and I don't want to make my choice without giving God the opportunity to say, this is what you need to do. And he just wrestled with it. Meanwhile, I kind of felt this confirmation on his choice, right? But I wasn't going to say that. And because I've been praying for him through this process. And so he said, he came back in like that evening, I think, after praying over for a couple of weeks, and said, I'm committed. This is my choice. I said, oh, cool. What changed? And he said, well, I just sat there before I had a Zoom call, and we've been praying about surrender. And so he said, I just was like, okay, God, I don't know why you're saying this, but I trust that you have a reason. So I surrender this choice to you. Truly, like if this is the school you want me to go to, that's great. If it's this one, that's great. Like I surrender it. And he said, I literally just felt like God was like, that's all I needed you to do. I just needed you to know that I'm a part of this process, surrender, and now make your choice. And he was like, I just felt totally at peace to say my choice is the right choice. And there you go. And I was like, oh, yay. Like those moments where it all comes together. You're like, oh, so I think just including them in that family prayer has been key for us, because they see the things that we're struggling with too, right? And then we kind of work through those together, and they have input. So it's a family practice, but then also absolutely something that we do over our kids.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. And I am just so grateful for your wisdom and insight. And I know that there's going to be a lot of mamas of teens that are listening in, and they're going to leave with some really practical handles. But I think that they're also going to leave super encouraged that, raising teenagers is hard, but it can also be such a joy. And so again, thank you guys so much for joining me. And listen, if you have listened in on this tomorrow, we've got a really fun topic with other moms. And tomorrow will be moms of adults, which is a whole different deal. And I'm really excited about that. But also, we would love it if you would join us on Sunday, whether in person or online, to celebrate Mother's Day with us. We just have a really special day just to celebrate women. And I'm really excited about it. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.